Bullets and pulse blasts tore through the alien patrol vehicle as Barzan rebels unleashed a hellstorm of firepower, but Dennis Morales just grinned like a fucking madman. The human soldier wasn't fazed in the slightest by the ambush on this far-flung alien world, even as his Barzan patrol partner Ren froze in shock and terror. Dennis lived for this shit. Dennis and Ren barely had time to bail out before their hover vehicle exploded into flame and shrapnel under the onslaught. Now they were stranded deep in hostile territory, massively outnumbered by heavily armed insurgents closing in for the kill. No backup, no comms, just the two of them against all odds. "Looks like the fun's just getting started," Dennis quipped as he unslung his pulse rifle, eager grin never leaving his face. Ren just stared at him in disbelief. How could this crazy human bastard be so flippant when they were seconds from being overrun and slaughtered? Dennis was part of the human expeditionary force sent to this backwater shithole of a planet to keep the peace between the Barzans and other squabbling alien factions. Superior human tech and weaponry meant they could stomp the primitive Barzans at will, but the natives had numbers on their side, plus a major grudge against perceived human arrogance. Tensions were a hair trigger from all-out bloodshed. Now it was just Dennis and Ren against a Barzan rebel force hell-bent on butchering them both. Two soldiers from different worlds divided by mistrust and bad blood, relying on each other to survive. Time to see if a human's fuck-it-all attitude and ingenuity could get them out of this clusterfuck alive. Dennis and Ren dove behind the nearest cover they could find, a cluster of massive boulders, as a hail of bullets and pulse blasts from the Barzan rebels ripped through the air around them. The human soldier peered around the edge of the boulder, pulse rifle raised. He lined up a shot and squeezed the trigger, dropping a rebel with a blast to the chest. Two more quick shots and two more rebels hit the dirt, never to get up again. Ren stared at Dennis, mandibles agape, as the human calmly picked off target after target with precise hits. Dennis glanced over at him. "What? You never seen a human shoot before?" The Barzan shook his head. "I heard you were good. Didn't know you were that good." Dennis shrugged. "Beginner's luck. Now, you know this terrain, right? I'm thinking I play the distraction, draw their fire while you sneak around and flank the bastards. Think you can handle that?" Ren clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Risky, but it might work. I can loop around through those ravines to the east, come at them from behind. Just don't get yourself killed in the meantime, human." "Worried about little old me? I'm touched." Dennis flashed a cocky grin. "Just be in position when you hear me light them up. It's going to be a hell of a show." With that, Dennis burst from cover and charged straight at the rebels, firing his rifle one-handed from the hip as he zigzagged and rolled to avoid the barrage of return fire suddenly focused on him. He vaulted over a boulder, energy pulses scorching the air where he'd been a split second before. A grenade flew his way, and he batted it aside with his rifle butt, the explosion sending up a shower of dirt and rock fragments behind him. While Dennis played bullet bait, Ren scurried through the rocky terrain, clambering up an embankment to get a vantage on the rebels' flank. Below him, the one-man army that was Dennis motherfucking Morales was still whirling, sprinting and blasting away, drawing all attention to himself. The guy moved like a dynamo, pulling off acrobatic leaps, slides and rolls that no being had any right to attempt outside of a Holovid stunt scene. Ren lined up his shots on the distracted rebels. The distinctive whine of his plasma carbine's charge cycle seemed to catch one rebel's notice. The Barzan male started to turn Ren's way. Too late. A burst of blue-white plasma bolts stitched a smoking line across the rebel's chest, and he dropped. Methodically, Ren picked off the remaining hostiles who were still focused on taking down the weaving, bobbing, one-man kill zone in their midst. At last, Dennis dove into cover behind an outcropping, sucking in a lung and checking his ammo as the shooting suddenly died off. He peeked out to see Barzan bodies littering the ground. No longer a threat. Ren skidded down the embankment to join Dennis, who was catching his breath and lazily blowing imaginary smoke from his rifle muzzle like some ancient Western vid hero. He glanced up at Ren. "Nice shooting, Blue Man Group. Knew you had it in you." The Barzan frowned at the unfamiliar reference. We got lucky, human, and there's bound to be more of them coming soon. We can't stay here. Aw, but I was just starting to have fun. Dennis pushed himself to his feet with a grunt, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. All right, first things first. Grab their gear while I see if they have any rides that are still in one piece. After a quick sweep of the area, the two commandeered a still functional Rebel ATV, along with as much ammo, medical supplies, and ration packs as they could grab. Dennis gunned the hovering vehicle's engine. Let's book. Don't know about you, but I could use a break from being target practice. He looked to Ren expectantly. I'm thinking we find some place to lie low and figure out our next move. You're the local guide. Where to? Ren considered a moment, then pointed westward. There's a series of caves in that direction, a few clicks from here. Should give us shelter for the night at least. Batcave it is. Dennis grabbed the control yoke and rocketed off toward the distant hills. By the time they reached the caverns, night was falling, the diurnal creatures of this world falling silent as the stars emerged overhead. They concealed the ATV behind an overhang, but not before Dennis grabbed a portable scanner from the gear they'd scrounged. Gotta make sure we don't wake up to any nasty surprises, he explained, sweeping the scanner around to check for body heat signatures or electronic emissions in their hidey hole. Satisfied it was clear, he deactivated the scanner. Me cave es su cave. Let's get cozy. They set up a makeshift camp deep in the cavern, the dancing light of a small thermal lamp pushing back the darkness. Dennis winced as he peeled off his tactical vest, revealing the ugly purple bruising of what was likely a couple cracked ribs. Ren sported his own share of plasma burns and lacerations, neither of them having escaped completely unscathed. Ren used his species' silk-like saliva to seal the worst of his wounds, while Dennis jabbed a painkiller infuser against his neck and sprayed quick heal foam over his injuries. Patched up as best they could manage, the human and Barzan sat back against the cave walls and turned their thoughts to what the fuck to do next. Dennis broke the silence first. Intel. We need to get whatever we know about those rebel assholes' operations back to HQ Prano. I'm thinking we boost one of their ships, zip back to human territory before they know what hit them. Ren's head tendrils shivered in agitation. Are you insane? That's suicide. We'd never make it past their perimeter alive. Never say never, buddy. There's a base near here, yeah? Couple clicks to the southwest? If we can sneak in, just the two of us. They'd cut us down before we got within 100 meters, Ren shot back. I thought you humans were arrogant, but I didn't realize you were stupid too. I won't let you get us both killed. Dennis surged to his feet, eyes flashing dangerously. Let me? I don't need your fucking permission, Squidhead. You don't like my plan? There's the door. Go tell your tentacle buddies hi for me. Ren rose as well, squaring off against the human. Maybe I should. Anything's better than dying for the glory of Dennis Morales and his ego. Fuck you, Dennis spat. My squad is rotting on some hillside, and every minute we spend with our thumbs up our asses is a minute their sacrifices for nothing. So take your cowardly bullshit and shove it. The pair stared each other down for a long, tense moment, fists clenched, jaws set. The gulf between their cultures and perspectives yawned wide, but beneath it simmered the inescapable reality. They were stuck with each other. This wasn't a problem either could punch their way out of alone. Finally, Dennis jabbed a finger against Ren's chest. You don't trust me, I get it. I'm not asking you to. But right now, you and me, we're all we've got. So stow your bullshit and let's figure out how to get off this rock in one piece. With a growl of frustration, Dennis spun away and stalked toward the cave entrance, fishing out a small disc-like device from a belt pouch, a quantum comm link. He pinged the connection, and a small hollow of his commanding officer snapped into focus. Morales, that you? Goddamn, is it good to see your ugly mug. Dennis snorted. Feelings mutual, sir. Got some updates for you. Sending the data package now. He plugged the link into his wrist computer and uploaded the precious intel they'd managed to gather on rebel movements and positions. The CO's avatar frowned as the data scrolled across his field of view. Mother of God. If these bastards link up with the Scarosian separatists, we're looking at a full-scale insurrection on our hands. My assessment as well, sir, which is why I'm requesting permission to commandeer enemy transport from the base on my current position. Behind him, Ren threw up his hands in disbelief. Was this lunatic really going to ignore all of his objections and warnings to charge headlong into a rebel stronghold? The CO seemed to consider this for a moment, then gave a firm nod. Permission granted, Sergeant. You get that intel back here ASAP, whatever it takes. We're counting on you. Understood, sir. See you on the flip side. Dennis cut the comlink and the holo vanished. He turned back to Ren, face set with determined perseverance. You hear that, Blue? Looks like we're going in, with or without your approval. Ren just stared at the human, at this cocksure, half-cocked madman grinning like he hadn't just volunteered them for a certain death ride. The Barzan had heard the stories about these Terran types, fearless to the point of insanity, eager to hurl themselves against impossible odds. He'd always dismissed them as tall tales, the kind of lurid exaggeration that always surrounded a new species on the galactic scene. But standing here now, faced with the force of nature that was Dennis in full-on mission mode, Ren began to wonder if maybe those wild stories held more truth than he'd believed. The sheer intensity in those predator eyes, the coiled lethality in every move, the almost playful excitement at the prospect of mayhem. It unnerved Ren on a primal level. And yet, some small, reckless part of him suddenly desperately wanted to see what this madman could do, wanted to witness the kind of glorious insanity that had forged humanity a bloody, defiant path to the stars. Ren exhaled hard through all 4 nostrils and checked the charge on his carbine. The central hangar is heavily guarded, he said at last, but there's a maintenance access near the sensor array that might get us in with less chance of being spotted. The techs there work on a skeleton shift rotation. If we time it right. Dennis flashed that wild, feral grin again and clapped Ren on the shoulder. Now you're talking! Come on then, partner. Let's go steal us a fucking spaceship. As he followed the human toward the dubious shelter of the ATV, a single thought crystallized in Ren's mind with inescapable certainty. One way or another, this was going to be a night to remember. The darkness of night wrapped around Dennis and Ren as they crept toward the rebel base. Dennis's eyes, evolved for nocturnal hunting, picked out details in the gloom. He held up a fist, signaling Ren to halt. 2 guards, 12 o'clock. Wait for my signal, Dennis whispered. The human's keen vision spotted a gap in the patrol pattern. He tapped Ren's shoulder and they darted through the blind spot, slipping past the outer defenses. Inside the base, Dennis moved like a predator. He crept up behind a sentry and struck, dropping the Barzan with a chokehold. Ren dispatched another guard with equal efficiency. This way, Ren hissed, leading them through twisting back alleys. They reached the hangar bay undetected. Ren pointed to a squat, boxy ship. That troop transport, light armor, but fast. Dennis nodded and pulled out a grenade. Time for some fireworks. He lobbed the explosive toward a nearby barracks. The thunderous blast shook the ground. Alarms blared as rebels poured out, rushing toward the explosion. Now! Dennis shouted. They sprinted for the transport, diving through the airlock. Dennis threw himself into the pilot's seat while Ren manned the guns. Hang on to your tentacles, Dennis yelled. The transport lurched into the air. Anti-aircraft fire erupted around them, rocking the ship. Dennis yanked the controls, sending them into a wild corkscrew. Ren's stomach lurched as they spiraled higher. We've got company! Ren shouted as rebel fighters screamed after them. Dennis pushed the engines to full burn. The transport shuddered under the strain. Ren returned fire, his plasma bolts lancing through the night sky. A vicious dogfight ensued. Dennis jinked and juked, narrowly avoiding incoming fire. One by one, Ren picked off their pursuers until the skies fell silent. We did it, Ren breathed in disbelief. Dennis grinned and punched in coordinates for the human outpost. As the adrenaline faded, they tended to each other's wounds. Not bad for a squid head, Dennis quipped. Ren snorted. You're insane, but effective. Just then, proximity alarms shrieked to life. A cloaked fighter decloaked on their 6, weapons hot. Ah, shit, Dennis groaned. Here we go again. The blaring proximity alarms shattered the brief moment of victory. Dennis's eyes snapped to the radar display, catching sight of a blip materializing out of nowhere. Shit, cloaked bogey on our 6. The transport lurched as Dennis threw it into a wild evasive pattern. A stream of plasma fire lanced past, missing by inches. The next volley wasn't so forgiving. Boom! The ship rocked violently as plasma tore through the hull. Sparks erupted from the control panel. Dennis wrestled with the yoke, fighting to keep them airborne as warning lights flashed across the board. We're hit! Controls are fried! The transport entered a sickening spiral, plummeting toward Barza's surface. G-forces slammed them back in their seats. Ren fumbled with his harness, managing to strap in. Dennis's face was a mask of concentration as he fought the dead controls. Muscles strained as he yanked on the yoke, trying to level their descent. The ground rushed up to meet them. Brace for impact. At the last second, Dennis wrenched the nose up. They slammed into the dirt, skidding and bouncing. Metal screamed as the hull tore apart. Finally, mercifully, they ground to a halt. Smoke filled the cabin. Dennis kicked out the cracked view screen and crawled out, dragging Ren behind him. They stumbled away from the burning wreckage. You okay? Dennis asked, scanning the area. Ren winced, clutching a nasty plasma burn on his arm. I'll live, but we're sitting ducks out here. Dennis nodded grimly. He sprinted back to the transport, disappearing inside. Moments later, he emerged, lugging a massive Barzan rail cannon. He shoved the weapon into Ren's hands. Cover me! Before Ren could protest, Dennis had shouldered his pulse rifle and taken off running toward where the stealth fighter had last been seen. What are you doing? Ren shouted after him. Dennis didn't slow down or look back. He charged headlong into certain death, pulse rifle at the ready. The air lit up with plasma fire. Bolts of energy scorched the ground around Dennis as he sprinted forward. He zigzagged unpredictably, making himself a harder target. More plasma rained down. Dennis dove and rolled, coming up firing. His pulse rifle spat a torrent of suppressing fire at the cloaked ship. Then Dennis did something insane. As plasma bolts sizzled past his head, he reached for a grenade. With a manic grin, he primed it and hurled himself at the fighter. Kaboom! A massive fireball engulfed both Dennis and the stealth craft. Ren's heart sank. No way the human could have survived that. But as the smoke cleared, Ren's jaw dropped. The fighter's canopy was blown open, and there, emerging from the cockpit, was a charred but very much alive Dennis. The human threw back his head and let out a primal victory howl that sent chills down Ren's spine. Barzan reinforcements were closing in fast, but Dennis was already in the pilot's seat, fingers flying over the controls. The stealth fighter hummed to life. It lifted off, guns blazing. Dennis strafed the incoming Barzan forces with terrifying precision. Bodies fell. Vehicles exploded. The rebels scattered, utterly demoralized by this unstoppable human whirlwind. The stealth fighter touched down near Ren with barely a bump. Dennis leapt out and helped the stunned Barzan to his feet. Nice of you to join me, Dennis said with a wink as he helped Ren into the cockpit. Let's get the hell out of here. Ren could only stare as Dennis calmly strapped in and punched in a course. The fighter rocketed into the sky, leaving the smoldering rebel base far behind. The stealth fighter tore through the atmosphere, its engine screaming as Dennis pushed it to its limits. Ren gripped his seat, the plasma burn on his arm throbbing with each jolt of turbulence. We're almost there, Dennis shouted over the roar. Just a few more. A shrill alarm cut him off. Red warning lights flooded the cockpit. Fuck, multiple bogeys on our 6. The sensor display lit up with a swarm of incoming Barzan interceptors. Dennis yanked the controls, sending them into a gut-wrenching dive. Plasma bolts sizzled past, so close Ren could feel their heat through the hull. How did they find us? Ren yelled. Dennis didn't answer, too focused on keeping them alive. He juked and weaved, but the Barzan ships were built for atmospheric combat. They closed in relentlessly. Boom! The fighter rocked as a plasma bolt found its mark. Sparks erupted from the control panel. We're hit. Stealth systems offline. More alarms joined the cacophony. Dennis fought the controls as their craft shuddered and bucked. Another volley of plasma fire hammered them, punching through armor plating. Ren saw the manic gleam in Dennis's eyes. The human's lips peeled back in a feral grin. Hang on to your tentacles, Blue. We're taking a little detour. The fighter banked hard, veering away from their original course. Ren's heart sank as he recognized the new heading. No, Dennis, that's the hidden rebel stronghold. It's suicide. But Dennis ignored him, pushing the damaged fighter even harder. The engines whined in protest as they rocketed towards certain doom. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from the rebel base, filling the sky with a web of plasma. Their shields flared and failed under the barrage. Smoke poured into the cockpit. Ren coughed and sputtered. Dennis, please, we have to turn back. The human didn't even glance his way. With eerie calm, Dennis reached over and strapped Ren into the ejection seat. The Barzan's eyes widened in horrified realization. What are you? Dennis pounded his fist down on the ejection controls. Ren's world turned inside out as he was violently thrown clear of the doomed fighter. The last thing he saw was Dennis's serene face as the cockpit disappeared in a ball of fire. Ren's parachute deployed automatically. He drifted down through smoke and debris, staring in shock at the devastation below. The rebel stronghold was flattened, reduced to smoking rubble by the kinetic force of the fighter's impact. His legs buckled as he hit the ground. Ren stumbled through the wreckage, coughing as acrid smoke filled his lungs. A glint of metal caught his eye, an arm jutting from a pile of twisted steel. Ren scrambled over, his heart's pounding. It was Dennis. The human's body was broken, barely recognizable. But impossibly, those eyes still held a spark of life. Dennis's mangled fingers pressed something into Ren's hand. A data chip, the mission intel. For Earth, Dennis wheezed. Then he went still, that defiant smirk frozen on his lips. Ren's legs gave out. He collapsed next to Dennis's body, tears streaming down his face. The Barzan could only stare in awed silence at the remains of the human who had sacrificed everything. Weeks later, Ren stood before the grizzled human commander. His hand shook slightly as he held out the precious data chip. The officer's eyes bored into him. Report, soldier. What happened out there? Ren swallowed hard. How could he possibly convey the magnitude of Dennis's actions? In the end, he settled for stark simplicity. Sir, Ren said, his voice thick with emotion, they really don't give a fuck.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.